I was sitting, I think, in a dining hall. It might have been the Morse dining hall, I'm not sure, or the Styles, I don't know. I was trying to hide from everyone. I was in the corner and I was basically like really questioning where I was and what I was doing and whether the projects that I was pursuing, were they going to turn into anything? Were they going to be helpful? Was I going to be able to make anything of that?
What's up, guys? Before we dive into today's interview, Ting wanted me to mention that her service, Zumprep, is offering free diagnostic exams. So if you guys are deciding between the SAT, ACT, you guys want a little bit of extra test prep help, I highly recommend signing up for her service. It's totally free. The link is in the bio. All right, guys? Thank you so much. Enjoy this interview. All right? Have a great day.
Welcome, guys. Today I'm joined by my friend Ting Gao. How's it going, Ting? Ting and I met years ago when we were both working as student techs. Not even a student tech, guys. This was called a cluster technician. Yeah, literally our job was to make sure printers didn't blow up, and we got paid like $14 an hour. Ting has become a really close friend. We realized we had a lot of things in common. Parents both running Chinese restaurants. That was uncanny, as well as our kind of entrepreneurial streak. So I am so honored and so happy that Ting is on the show and she's going to tell us about her experience. First things first. Yeah, Ting, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hello. I think you've given me enough of an introduction, but yeah, so I've recently graduated from Yale, mechanical engineering degree. I'm currently an entrepreneur, work on a couple of different projects, namely HireaStudent. But yeah, Kevin and I go way back and it's been a long time coming. So I'm really excited to be here and, hopefully have some interesting questions come my way.
Yeah, which that honestly brings me to the first question, which is, why did you become a mechanical engineering major? What was that like? Like, what was that? What does that major require? Was it easy, hard?
Yeah. Actually, so I started at Yale wanting to be a doctor. So I was on the pre-med route. And most of it was, of course, my parents, like typical Asian family, would push me to be, either a doctor or a lawyer. And I chose doctor, but I really hated the sight of vomit or blood or really like anything to do with the human body. And so I'm not really sure how I made it through high school thinking that I would be a doctor, but I did. And then I got to college and I started taking like classes and working in labs. And I was like, wow, this is not like, I'm feeling like nauseous every day. This is not the move. And so I changed to mechanical engineering, partly to please my parents because I wanted to have some sort of like, hard STEM in my major and to, let them know that I was still doing the science track, but also because I genuinely wanted to solve problems and make things. And mechanical engineering seemed like the right major to build that foundational skill. Like, is it hard? Yes. Mechanical engineering is hard. Like, there's a lot of work. You definitely need to study. It's just as hard as pre-med, I would say, but you have to commit to it and you have to love it. So it's just like any other major, just have to commit yourself.
Okay, gotcha. How do you think that being a mechanical engineer prepares you for life as an entrepreneur? But before you even get into that question, I'm like, how did you become an entrepreneur in the first place? Did you always know that you had this kind of streak going, or was there, an experience that kind of sparked things when you were at Yale?
Actually, so I never really planned to be an entrepreneur. I always found it to be fascinating. Like, wow, like people are like basically out there. They don't have like a salary job. They're just like making things happen. I don't remember who told me this, but I had come across this quote back in the day that was like, find and do the things you love and learn how to make money doing them. And so, I guess I kind of followed that motto and I realized I love to solve problems. I love to create things. I love selling things. And I like making an impact on, the daily lives of everyday people. And so entrepreneurship seemed like the natural route for me. The question was specifically like, how did mechanical engineering lead you down to entrepreneurship, or can you?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think throughout my mechanical engineering courses at Yale, they're actually somewhat theoretical and not very applicable and therefore not really entrepreneurial. But I started kind of experimenting with classes outside scope of the major. And that's one of the things about Yale that's really nice. You get to explore, the humanities and social sciences and languages. And they not only allow that type of environment, but they actually encourage it and enforce it. So everyone has to take like classes outside of their major and be, you know, that well-rounded Yale man or Yale woman. So I experimented with some entrepreneurial classes and I really enjoyed them. And I was like, wow, like I wish this was a major, like entrepreneurship. But of course there isn't, not like a formal major for entrepreneurship. So I just try to dabble as much as I could. That was still kind of somewhat relevant to my major. And that's how I realized, well, I want to like, you know, build technology that helps the average person.
Let's dig deeper into that, because I didn't even know there were entrepreneurial classes at Yale. What class did you take and when did you take it? What was it about? What did you guys cover?
So you're familiar with the SEED, right? The Center for Engineering, Innovation, and Design. That was this huge building that was built at Yale a couple years ago. And the whole purpose of it is to be a makerspace and to house a bunch of like engineering / entrepreneurial / design classes.
Yeah.
And I think of it kind of as like Sci-City's twin, Sci-City being kind of like the entrepreneurial hub at Yale. It's the engineering and kind of STEMmy twin for that kind of, I guess, if that analogy works. And so some of the classes there, we have some great engineering professors that teach classes like Making It, for instance, which is literally about like the whole purpose of the class is to find a problem, solve it, and at the end of the class, basically pitch your solution. Kind of like a mini, somewhat of a Y Combinator-esque class. It's not really meant to like create startups, but a lot of people end up spinning startups out of it. And for a while we did as well. My team worked on Suite, which is a booking platform for private events to help like people find venues for like birthdays and graduation celebrations, etc. So there are a lot of cool classes. Most of them aren't as entrepreneurial, like they're not necessarily about selling, but they're about making. So there's some architecture classes and like I think UI and UX classes that are somewhat new as well. So Yale has got a lot to offer. They're realizing that entrepreneurship is the future. So they're moving there.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are super recent developments. Even the seat itself is kind of new. Sci-City, brand spanking new. Like they just built that new building. The Psy is the name of the dude, Robert, or was it Joseph Psy, or maybe it's Robert Psy. But the city stands for Center of Innovative Thinking at Yale. So, you know, Ting, I know you've worked on quite a few different projects, quite a few different startup sort of ventures. Maybe you can walk us a little bit through that. Like, I'd love to hear a timeline. And, you know, a lot of people, I mean, one thing that I kept in mind during my entrepreneurial journey was it usually takes the average entrepreneur like 3 attempts before they have like a solid, profitable business that's ready to scale, before they even have like their first success. But maybe you can talk a little bit about like, you know, when did you start your first project? Was it during college? Was it before college? And then tell us how you got to like where you are now, because you are like you guys are kind of funded, you're getting like very legit in terms of the startup.
Really? Well, thank you. Yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint exactly when it started. I would say it definitely started with a few class projects I did. Many of them failed, most of them. I'd say like 90% of every project I've started has failed, but I've learned from it and I've applied those lessons to my new projects, which has helped this, you know, them turn into something fruitful. But it started back in the day. I was working on the CID project, this summer internship, and we built a device that could attach onto any faucet and help conserve water. And that was like super cool. And we're like, yeah, except like 3 months into that internship, after we built that device and it was working, we thought like we had like, you know, totally discovered something new and we were gonna like maybe patent it, whatever. We realized that a really big faucet company, I think called Moen, something like that, they came out with almost exactly what we were building. And so we're like, darn, too late. We should have like tried to sell that to them before. So I think it really started with like being in the CID, kind of working on engineering projects and like really pushing the boundaries of what I could do and like what kind of impact I could make. But some of the other projects, I mentioned Suite earlier. I'm currently working on HireaStudent. I think the most important thing to note about working on projects with people is actually building the network and getting to know new people and learning new skills along the way. And so with every project that's failed or not failed, whatever it is, I've learned a lot of lessons. I've also met people that have been pivotal to my life that are currently now like my co-founders and team members, etc. So it's more about like what I've taken away from every project.
I want you to talk more about this entrepreneurial journey. What do you think is your like lowest low as an entrepreneur, or has been your lowest low and your highest high?
Oh,
if you can get like real specific, like time, date, place, like the context. I want to know the situation.
So many lows, honestly. Okay, I think one low was, I think it was 2 years ago, right before Thanksgiving. And I can't remember exactly if that fell on the 24th or something. I knew it was a Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday, I was planning on going to Connecticut or West Haven area to visit my family. And I was sitting, I think, in a dining hall. It might have been the Morse dining hall, I'm not sure, or the Styles. I don't know. I was trying to hide from everyone. I was in the corner and I was basically like really questioning where I was and what I was doing and whether the projects that I was pursuing, were they going to turn into anything? Were they going to be helpful? Was I going to be able to make anything of that? And that was a kind of a low for me because I didn't really know where I was headed. And I worked in private equity actually the summer prior to that fall, and I had a return offer. And so I was sitting on like a really hard decision of like, okay, do I continue with these projects, but knowing that I might not have the financial stability to continue them. Like I wish I had a trust fund or like, like $1 million in the bank, then I could do anything I wanted. But I didn't have that. And I have family that are kind of dependent on me. And I was just dreading going back the next day and telling my parents like, hey, like I might not continue with this like finance job. I want to, do startup work. I just dreaded that conversation. And that was kind of a low for me. And I was just thinking about like how my mom would react to that. Like her face, she has like a specific face where she isn't upset. She's not happy. She's just totally blank face. And it's absolutely scary. And she'll just stare at you for like 5 solid minutes and make you question everything about yourself. So I was just going through that. And that was kind of one of my lows, knowing that like I was at that point, I was not sitting on anything that felt successful, but I wanted to do something and I just didn't know what. I was at a crossroads.
And what like pushed you over the edge? How did you find the courage to, you guys need to understand the context. Like this is not a decision that many Yale students go through. Like Ting and I, we came from kind of like tough backgrounds. And I think that, man, like if I were in that situation, I probably would have ran with the internship. And I think that it took like an enormous amount of courage and faith. Like how did you make that decision? That's wild to me, honestly, hearing about it. I remember when you were questioning, but hearing it again, like it really brings me back to that moment.
Well, you know what? Actually, I did take that offer on the sly. And I was just about to tell you, and then you went into like you were so brave. Oh dear. Oh dear. So I lost the courage to tell my parents that because I was like, I didn't really have much courage to begin with. And so I'm like, you know what, I'll take this job offer. And because it felt like the right thing to do, I had a good experience at the internship. So I took the job offer and I told myself, look, I'm going to act like half of me is going to act like, yes, I have this job offer and I'm going to give my all to this job. And then the other half of me is going to be like, I'm going to keep my eyes, ears, whatever,
ready to jump ship whenever.
Not only am I going to keep my eyes and ears open, but I'm also going to actively think about like, what can I do? Like, where do I belong? What can I do? Like, what is my purpose? What do I love doing? And keep kind of like moving in those directions. And if I ever, maybe 5 months down the line, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, this other half of me is over here and this other half of me is like 5 miles that way in a totally different direction, then I should recalibrate and think about how do I align my career self with my personal goals.
Gotcha. So you took the offer. Did you work at the PE firm for like a year, 2 years? Like you're now an entrepreneur, right?
Okay. So, the whole situation did not go as well as I planned. I took the offer, but I
Uh-huh.
never began work actually. So I took the offer, and then, as you know, coronavirus started becoming this huge issue globally, and my job was pushed back, full-time job. They were like, "Oh, we're not going to be in office." This was around like around April, May, around May when I got
Okay.
some emails that were like, I was supposed to start, I think, in May. So I was contacting my manager, and they weren't sure if they were going to be in the office for a while, and therefore no one would be there to onboard me, and they were still figuring out like Zoom, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I pushed my internship back, or my job, I should say, I keep saying internship. And during that time, like prior to those months, I think from February, March to like April, May time, like that course of the month, I was working on a few projects that were kind of doing well and were somewhat stable enough for me to be like, you know what, I really enjoy this work, and I'm not sure I'm not going to make like a six-figure salary anytime soon with these projects, but it's enough to like kind of make a living and be able to kind of survive. And so I quit. Yeah,
Wow.
I
So
quit
what you're
before I
telling
started.
me, okay, wow. This is okay. You're telling me that coronavirus made you an entrepreneur is what I'm hearing.
Basically, yeah, you can title that YouTube video,
All
"Coronavirus
right.
Makes Me an Entrepreneur."
Yeah, speaking of Yale entrepreneurship, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. Like, what were your thoughts about Yale entrepreneurship? Did you think like we had a great program? Where do you think it could have been better? What do you think about like college entrepreneurship in general? Do you think it's a good idea for kids to be like entrepreneurs in college? Or you think like if your kid was an entrepreneur in college or your little brother, like what would you think? What advice would you give him or her?
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
so
spill the deets, man. I want to know.
I need like a notepad so I can like write down all your questions, keep track of them. But wow, a lot could be improved
Let's hear it. Yeah, I'll take notes for Sci City. I'll send
yeah.
him an email.
Well, I actually, I'm partially to blame. Probably, I was on the student advisory board for Sci City, so I take as much liability and that credit for not making it as good as it could be. I think the part of the problem with entrepreneurship in college is that when you're in college, you're basically a full-time student, right? And when you're an entrepreneur, you're expected to be a successful entrepreneur. You really have to commit all of your time to it and all of your mental, emotional, physical energy to it to make it work. And I'm sure you might have talked about this on your channel, but it's hard, right? You're trying to like make sure you graduate, have a good GPA, and you might actually be someone who cares about your GPA. Like me, I was like, wow, I like still need to do well in these PSETs, and at the same time, like, wow, like this business might be working, and so I was kind of pulled apart, and so it's hard being an entrepreneur in college, and I wish there were more resources for that to help people kind of find that balance. Maybe it's like a restructured semester. You do like a half semester, you have entrepreneurship, because I really think that entrepreneurship is a class in itself. I learn every day on the job. I learn when I'm interviewing customers. I learn when I do a lot of just-in-time learning. I come across a new problem or learn how to code this in this new language or whatever it is, right? You're learning, and I think that's like the best class ever. So like I have a lot of praise for Sci City, partly I belonged to that organization at one point. And so I have some loyalty to it. And it's a great program at Yale, and they have a lot of resources. But I challenge people to think about college entrepreneurs in almost like a whole different perspective. Maybe you could be a student and an entrepreneur at the same time if you can find the right balance to it. But it's hard to do both full time. You also asked about some advice. So wait, can you repeat those questions? Advice for like for someone who's going through that experience, or
advice for college students who are interested in entrepreneurship, who might be like first time founders. And then also like, I mean, yeah, you pretend if you had a little brother, an imaginary little brother or sister, and they were a freshman at a top 20 school at any university really, and they were trying to get started with entrepreneurship. Like, what do you think they should spend their first 3 to 6 months doing?
So if I were to give any advice, it would be build your foundational skills I think a lot of college entrepreneurs jump into like, oh, like I've discovered the new Facebook or the new whatever, I'm going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. The chances of that are very slim, but you can increase your chances of making some interesting solution or some sort of progress in some industry if you build the skills for that. So what are these skills? I think everyone should have hard skills, so some sort of technical background, whether it's some design background, knowing like the Adobe suite, definitely have some coding experience. So most of the products, ventures nowadays are backed by software. And so you should understand software, make software, be immersed in software. That will help you understand, like, am I making a project or am I making something that is actually valuable, and how do I actually make it, right? So build those foundational skills, do a boot camp, learn, like read every book you can get your hands on about any subject matter that interests you, not just entrepreneurship. Like be a sponge, absorb everything. And, don't spend just 3 to 6 months doing that. Spend a lifetime doing that. I know that sounds crazy, but like, just be a sponge all the time, and you never know what happens, what you come across, the ideas you have. The other thing is when you're early in college, like when you're starting off in college, you have a lot of opportunity to meet new people and make connections and learn from those other people. So definitely take that opportunity as well. I feel like I didn't go out of my shell to like meet new people and really engage in parties or whatever enough, because I was like trying to go back home and work on my P-sides or work on this project, whatever it is. And I think looking back retrospectively, I realized that making those connections and those friends, that's just as important as pursuing your own problem or your own project or your whatever it is. Because you look back at it and it's honestly like those connections and those conversations you have with people in the dining halls that give you new ideas to help propel your idea and that take you to new places. So
yeah. I love that. Speaking of those kinds of conversations, do you remember any specific conversations, or maybe like what advice would you have for someone to quote unquote network and do that consistently in college?
Okay, well, I'll start with the conversation that I've had. Back when like Commons was open, I was first year. I used to sit down and talk to grad students all the time, or whoever, anybody. Like one time I talked to a monk, another time I talked to like a physics grad. Through those conversations, I actually built a lot of the knowledge that I have today. I forget his name. I think it was like Rob or something. He was a graduate student at the forestry school, and he was telling me, yeah, I wish that when I was in undergrad, I asked him like, oh, is there anything you wish you'd done as an undergrad? And he said, yeah, like I wish I'd built up, more skills here in these certain areas, or like kept abreast of the news, or did this and this and this. And he kind of like gave me a list, and I like kind of took it seriously, and I really lived off of that to some extent. And I talked to people who just had like interesting ideas. Sometimes I didn't like really maybe agree with those ideas, but they helped me understand how people thought or how people think. And I think that just helps you grow as a person, just being able to like talk to people and connect with them. In terms of networking, like tips for networking, honestly, like you'll hear this again and again. Like if you go into a situation and you're like, I'm gonna network, you're not gonna like in a successful like wow you're not going to get out of it what you thought you'd get out of it, is what I'm saying. And you might come across as kind of like awkward or like very clearly trying. There is like, I swear, like gone to so many like I guess networking parties, companies, and for job fairs, etc. Everyone puts on the same smile, has the same like frozen face and asks the same questions, whatever. Just be yourself. Honestly, if you're weird and spunky, be that. If you're like kind of quiet and you want to ask some questions that are like almost like kind of really out there, or like people might question them, all like not controversial questions, but like questions that are against the fray, ask them, right? Just be yourself, and when you are your genuine self, then you'll find people who want to work with you and not your network self. Right? Think of it this way, like everyone goes into these networking events acting like the person that they think they should be at the networking event. And so everyone ends up being basically the same person. So if you can be someone different yourself, then then you will actually really like come across as, wow, like this is like someone interesting that I might want to work with or whatever it is. So be yourself, be you. I don't like to give like kind of, I guess, like common and like colloquial like, mottos or phrases, but sometimes it's it does ring true. Be you.
So Ting, kind of returning back to, I'm looking back at our list. I asked you about your lowest low as an entrepreneur, but what do you think has been your highest high? What are some of the good days, the good moments?
So there are a few of them. I think generally when you're working on something and you're getting those Slack notifications, like someone just like basically bought a membership or purchased your product or signed up or whatever, that gives you such a like adrenaline rush. You're like, yes, yes, yes. I did something right. So like I've had a lot of like highs from that. Honestly, like literally speaking, it's a feeling of like elevation. So that's also been, and when you meet people and they're like, wow, I would use that. Or like when you talk to a customer that's used your product and they say, wow, this product has been super helpful. Finally I found a student. I saved a lot of money. The student has been amazing at this, yard work or mowing my lawn or whatever it is. And I've made a real connection and I'm going to come back and use your platform again. Like, thank you so much. That's like, you come away from that conversation being like, yeah, that's like why I get up every day. So I would say those are the highs.
For sure. Those are such sweet moments. Those are even better than getting paid or selling your company. I think seeing how your product or service affects customers.
Well, don't get me wrong. When you sell out and make a lot of money, that feels pretty good too, I must say.
True. So speaking of selling out and cashing in, I'm wondering, what is your long-term goal with this company? I mean, there's so many different ways to be an entrepreneur. You could run it forever. Theoretically, you could run it for decades. You could become like a chairman. You could like run it, be involved, but not as involved. You could find a successor. You could sell it. You could do another venture. What are your thoughts about exit strategies as an entrepreneur? And also just like, what are your life goals in general? Like, are you looking to cash out, retire, move to Cancun, raise like 3 little mini Tings and chill out? Or, what is your like ambition?
I mean, yeah, I do think about these days. And sometimes when I think about them, they stress me out because there's just so many things to think about already, like my day to day, like all these things I have to do. But it's definitely important to think about the future and figure out like, what are your next moves like 5-10 years from now. I think with some of the ventures we have, some of the projects that we are doing now, it's really like a team question. It's like a team thought process. It's not necessarily about like, oh, do I want to exit, And it also depends on what you're building. If you're building something that is meaningful and valuable, you probably want to be a part of it for a long time. But if you're building or maybe if you're someone who is building something, but you love working on a bunch of other projects and you don't want to stay at a place for too long, then maybe it would make sense for you to exit, take an advisory role in the future, things like that. So I'm still figuring out exactly what I want to do. I think like I love empowering students and building communities, and that's what we do through HireaStudent, and like helping students find jobs and through their profiles, use that to apply to college and careers and whatever. And I love seeing that progress. So it's something that we've poured a lot of energy into, and we will continue to do so. So in terms of like, those next moves, it's more like, let's just think of it as like, this is it, right? And keep doing it. But one thing that I think you might be interested in learning about is we also operate a venture studio. So it's called a venture studio, literally ABS. And we work with clients like real companies and help them build sites and rebrand and work on different entrepreneurial goals. So that's like also a way for me to continue dabbling into other projects and constantly pushing the boundaries of what I know and building more skills. So so I kind of have the best of both worlds in some ways. It's like focus on one project, creating value here, feeling like I'm making an impact, and really loving and like living what I'm building. And on the other side, I'm still dabbling into, helping other businesses and different projects at different problem spaces.
Wow, very cool. Very cool. Okay.
But I don't have the life you have though. You're like tromping around Brazil.
Yeah, my life is pretty good. And I guess we could talk a little bit about, there's so many different ways to do entrepreneurship. I think that when I first ran my startup, the very first one, Home Cooked, it was a social dining app that let you book like home cooked meals made by people in your neighborhood. Ting knows all about it, but I'm just telling you first time viewers.
That's some first-hand experience with that.
Yeah. So the whole philosophy there was I became so entranced with that one definition of startup success, which is you scale to 1 billion users, you get funded by a venture capital firm, you raise like your seed round, and then you raise your series A, B, C, D. You could even go public, you sell your company. And that is like very traditional definition of kind of startup success. And during quarantine, like I started reading a lot of startup books. I think I read like 10 to 20, and mainly about successful startups, even like Twitter. I read Elon Musk's biography. I read one about DraftKings. And like these people raised tons of money and sold their businesses, and they were really, really miserable. Like they were, I was like, I would never want to live through what these people lived through. Like overworking so hard that they got like sick from stress or couldn't see their kids. Like, when I really boiled down to like, what is my goal? My goal is I've always wanted to be a dad and raise a family. And entrepreneurship for me is just a means to that end, like the business that I'm running now, which is a tutoring business, is a lot more chill. And it's just not as time consuming as what Home Cooked used to be. And always have that pressure of like, we need to build more, do more. There's another mantra that I just another perspective that I encountered with entrepreneurship, which is instead of like growing and growing every single year, you could just maintain what you have, but slowly like give this more autonomy. So it runs more automatically with less effort. It's what Tim Ferriss calls a muse in his like 4-Hour Work Week book. That book also kind of blew
that's
my
a great
mind.
book.
Yeah. But anyways, I think this is pretty much it for today. I might bother Ting again and just ask her more personal questions about her experience at Yale. We're going to talk about social life. We could talk more about academics a little bit, but just wanted to get her viewpoint about entrepreneurship. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I'll harass Ting, and maybe she'll have a spare couple of minutes that she's like eating lunch.
Seriously unqualified to do these interviews, but
no, you're totally qualified. So thank you so much, Ting, for joining us, and we'll catch you guys at the next one.
Yeah, thank you for having me.